How does a country that's all about avoiding other people's fights suddenly jump into the biggest war the world had ever seen? It's an incredible story, America's leap from peace to war, and it all happened in the blink of an eye.
Okay, so here's the real head-scratcher. In 1916, Americans literally re-elected their president because he promised to keep us out of war. And then, just a few months later, they're in it. How on earth does that happen? Let's dig in and figure it out.
So let's rewind to 1914. Europe just erupts into flames, right? And over in America, most people are breathing a huge sigh of relief. I mean, you've got this giant ocean separating you from the chaos. The government's official line was neutrality, but for everyday folks, it went way deeper than that. It was just who they were.
And this slogan? He kept us out of war. That wasn't just some clever marketing. That was everything. It was the absolute bedrock of President Wilson's campaign. When he won, everyone saw it as a crystal-clear message from the American people. Stay out of Europe's mess. It was his whole brand, really.
But if you look a little closer, that whole neutrality thing gets complicated. The country was basically a pressure cooker of different loyalties. You had millions of German Americans and Irish Americans who, let's be honest, saw Britain as the real villain. You had powerful pacifist groups growing stronger every day. And then, kind of quietly, you had the big shots on the East Coast who were totally rooting for the Allies. So yeah, this was not one big happy neutral family. It was a country completely torn.
And if you want to know what people were actually feeling, just listen to this. This was the title of a hit song in 1915. We're not talking about some obscure protest anthem. This was a smash hit. It was the voice of millions of parents, plain and simple, a powerful cry to keep their kids away from the horrors of trench warfare.
Okay, so America's built this fortress of neutrality, right?
Well, it wasn't nearly as strong as it looked, because some pretty powerful forces were starting to chip away at the walls, and these forces were coming from two different directions. One was about money, and the other was about morality.
Yeah, you can pretty much always follow the money, can't you? So while the government was talking about neutrality, American businesses were singing a very different tune. Exports to the Allies just went through the roof. We're talking billions of dollars in loans from banks like JP Morgan. So whether anyone wanted to say it out loud or not, the American economy was getting seriously tangled up in an Allied win.
And then, you get shocks that have nothing to do with money. The sinking of the Lusitania was a massive turning point. Now look, it's true the ship was secretly carrying weapons, but the public didn't focus on that. What they saw was a German submarine sinking a passenger ship and killing almost 1,200 people, including Americans. It was seen as just barbaric. And when you add that to the horror stories coming out of Belgium, it started to paint Germany as the bad guy in a way that no loan or export deal ever could.
So you can see from this timeline, this was really a slow burn, not a sudden explosion. It wasn't just one thing. It was this steady drip, drip, drip of events over 3 years. You start with the shock over what was happening in Belgium. Then comes the gut punch of the Lusitania. And it all leads to that critical moment in early 1917, when Germany makes a huge gamble and decides to unleash its U-boats on everything, fully knowing that America would probably jump into the war because of it. So by the start of 1917, that fortress of neutrality is basically rubble. America is teetering right on the edge. All it needed was one, or in this case, two final pushes to go over.
See, Germany's big gamble was this. They thought they could crush Britain with their submarines before a slow, unprepared America could even get its soldiers on boats. And the results of that gamble? Well, you can see them right here. American ships started getting sunk, and American sailors started dying. Suddenly, this wasn't some far-off debate anymore. It was real, and it was deadly.
And then, just when you think it can't get any crazier, this happens. The Zimmermann telegram. This thing was an absolute bombshell. It was a secret message from Germany to Mexico, and it basically said, hey, if America joins the war against us, you should attack them, and when we win, we'll help you get back Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. I mean, can you imagine? The American public went absolutely ballistic. This wasn't a European war anymore. This was a threat right on their own doorstep.
So with submarines sinking ships and a plot to invade from the south, President Wilson has to do something. And what he does is one of the biggest political pivots you'll ever see. He takes this decision to go to war and he transforms it. It's not just about self-defense anymore. Oh no, it's about a grand, noble mission to save the entire world. And this is the quote that changes everything. Wilson stands before Congress and he gives this incredible speech. He says America isn't fighting for land or for revenge. Nope. He says we're fighting to create a brand new kind of world, a world that would be, in his words, made safe for democracy. It's an incredibly powerful idea. And that was it. Congress voted, and it was official. On April 6, 1917, the United States declared war. Think about that. Just a few short months after overwhelmingly voting for a president who kept us out of war. The era of standing on the sidelines was over.
But going to war, well, it had some really unexpected and, frankly, contradictory results. You have this high-minded, idealistic mission for the world, but what was happening back home and what happened after the fighting stopped was a whole different story.
And here is maybe the biggest irony of all. While America is sending its soldiers overseas to fight for democracy, free speech was basically being shut down at home. The government passed these incredibly tough laws, the Espionage and Sedition Acts, which pretty much made it illegal to speak out against the war. Thousands of people were actually jailed for it. It's a huge contradiction, right? Fighting for freedom abroad by taking it away at home.
So, once the war is over, Wilson shows up with his master plan for making sure this never, ever happens again. It's called the 14 Points, and it was a truly radical vision for its time. He's talking about no more secret deals, freedom of trade, letting people choose their own governments, and the big one, a general association of nations to keep the peace.
Now, the absolute core of this whole plan was the League of Nations, and the core of that was something called Article 10. Basically, it was a promise of collective security. You attack one of us, you attack all of us, and we'll all respond. It sounds good in theory, right? But this one little article is about to cause a huge political firestorm back in the States.
And here's the tragedy. Back in the Senate, powerful leaders like Henry Cabot Lodge looked at Article 10 and they panicked. They saw it as giving up Congress's constitutional power to declare war. They were terrified it would just drag America into one European conflict after another, automatically. Wilson, though, he wouldn't budge an inch. He refused to compromise. And so, the Senate voted no. They rejected the treaty.
Just let that sink in for a second. The United States never joined the League of Nations. The guy who came up with the whole idea couldn't get his own country to sign on. America had jumped into a world war to change the world, and at the end of it all, it just turned its back and went home, crippling the League before it even had a chance to get started.
So that leaves us with this big, messy question. Wilson's League failed, but the idea didn't completely die. It eventually led to the United Nations. So was America's decision to enter World War I a terrible mistake that cost so much and ended in a flawed peace? Or was it actually the necessary, painful birth of America as a global superpower? It's an incredible legacy, and it's one we are absolutely still grappling with today.